Alan Dershowitz is no stranger to controversy. Lately, he's taken much flack from his colleagues in the legal profession, from nearly everyone who doesn't call themselves a conservative, for his opinions on the Russia probe and for his latest book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump. But he's now calling Donald Trump's decision to declare a national emergency to fund his border wall along the U.S. southern border a mistake. Let's find out why as Professor Dershowitz joins us from his palatial studio in Miami. Alan is a constitutional scholar, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus. Before we get to the emergency declaration, Alan, multiple news outlets are now reporting that Robert Mueller will likely wrap up his investigation as early as next week. What do you expect?
Well, I expect it'll be a very, very critical report. Put together a circumstantial case. I don't think there'll be any smoking guns, though you never know. And I hope, because I think this would be the only fair way, that it be presented to the Attorney General. The Attorney General then give it over to Trump's legal team, give them a week or 10 days to file a reply, and then release both the Mueller report and the reply at the same time so that the American public can read them both and judge for themselves which is more credible and which is more persuasive.
Now, Mueller cannot indict himself, can he? He can't indict Trump.
Well, he can. I mean, technically, the grand jury technically indicts, but grand jurors will indict a ham sandwich. They're just 25 chairs that are moved around by prosecutors. Prosecutors decide who the grand jury should indict. Mueller is a prosecutor, so Mueller can indict. I don't think he can indict the president because I think the Constitution precludes a sitting president from being indicted while in office. He can be indicted after he leaves office or if he's impeached.
All right. What will the public, in your opinion, get this report?
Yes, I think that Attorney General Barr, who is a really, really good person and determined to do the right thing, will eventually send the report to the public and to the Congress, perhaps with some redactions. I hope very few. I think the American public is entitled to see as much as possible consistent with national security concerns.
If you were Donald Trump, would you be very worried?
I would be worried politically. I don't think I'd be worried legally, though you never know. You should always be worried. Being worried is a good thing. It's prudent. If you're a defense lawyer, you're always worried. And if you're a defendant, you should be worried. I don't think he's in legal jeopardy, but I do think the report will be politically very critical. And that won't be the right thing to do. You know, prosecutors are not supposed to express political opinions, nor are they supposed to express opinions on the goodness or badness of a defendant. That was Comey's mistake. When he went after Hillary Clinton after declaring that she had committed no crime, he then said that in his opinion, she had engaged in, and then he described her conduct in very negative ways. I don't think that a report should contain anything other than allegations either of criminal conduct or no criminal conduct. I think that opining on the virtue or vice of a person is beyond the scope of a prosecutor, especially since the prosecutor only hears one side of the story.
You have said that President Trump's decision to declare a national emergency to build a wall a mistake. Okay, is it also a constitutional error?
Well, it may be. The Constitution provides that all spending bills must originate in the House of Representatives. This is, in some respects, an end run around that. Calling it an emergency doesn't make it so. An emergency usually is something that has happened so suddenly, like 9/11 or Pearl Harbor, that Congress may not have time to act, and the president has to make the decision himself. But here, this has been a problem that we've suffered with for many, many, many years. Moreover, Congress has already authorized over $2 billion that he can start building the wall with. So I don't see the emergency, and I think at least some courts will say, we don't see the emergency. What the Supreme Court will decide, nobody can tell because there are two new justices. And some justices may say, look, we can't second guess a presidential declaration of emergency. Other judges will say, no, we have to look to see whether this is a circumvention of the constitutional provision that spending bills start in the House of Representatives must be voted on by Congress. I don't think it's an emergency if Congress says to the president, no. That's part of their constitutional authority. That's part of our system of checks and balances.
If the Supreme Court, let's say, decides in Trump's favor The next president could declare climate change a national emergency, health a national emergency, right?
Yeah, and presidents have. You know, look, this all started with Thomas Jefferson when he bought Louisiana, the Louisiana Purchase, without authorization from Congress. And a lot of people said, my God, the president has exceeded his authority. Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus. Franklin Delano Roosevelt put 110,000 innocent Japanese Americans in detention centers. Truman seized the steel mills. So we've had a lot of presidential expansion of power, and I think it's only getting worse. I don't think the framers had in mind expanding the presidential power in this way. I think they really thought that the power to spend should be with Congress, not with the president.
Did the president make a mistake when he said in making his announcement that he could do the wall over a longer period of time? I don't need to do this right now, but I think I should hurry it up. Doesn't that take away from the word emergency?
Yes, I think it did. It made it clear that this wasn't really an emergency, that he was doing it to circumvent the power of Congress. It turned him down. Whether the courts will hold that against him or not, we just don't know. Courts differ as to whether you look at presidential statements or just the action that the president took.
All right, Alan, you're good at this. What do you think the court... Everyone is saying now the Chief Justice will be the new Kennedy, and he's going to divide between 4 and 4, and he'll be the fifth in many cases. Do you expect that?
Well, I knew John Roberts when he was a student at the Harvard Law School, and I've met him on several occasions since. I have very high regard for him. I think he understands that the role of Chief Justice is different from the role of an Associate Justice. He has to maintain the integrity of the Supreme Court, and I think he will do what he thinks is best for the United States Supreme Court. So I think he will be a fifth vote on some issues. I think Judge Kavanaugh may be a fifth vote on some issues. He may surprise some people. I think one of the first issues we'll see is the review of the recent decision regarding restrictions on abortion rights. So it'll be interesting. The Chief Justice did grant the deciding vote on the stay, but that doesn't tell us necessarily how we'll vote when the case comes, if it comes to the Supreme Court, on the merits.
Alan, do you see the wall as a necessity?
Well, I see border security as a necessity. I don't think it has to be in the form of a wall. Look, I think many of us favor Israel putting up a wall separating the West Bank from Israel proper, and a wall in the Gaza, or at least a security fence. Security fences are necessary to protect the public. A wall is a symbol, though, and I think it's a mistake to think of it as a wall, but thinking of it as a security barrier makes some sense. Will it provide 100% security? Of course not. Drugs are smuggled in legally to the country and through other ways, and of course drug smugglers will figure out ways of circumventing anything you build. But I'm not against security. I'm not against preventing illegals from coming into the United States. I think we ought to be more lenient in letting people come in the United States generally, but they have to come in legally.
The New York Times reports that Trump asked then-acting Attorney General Whittaker to put his ally and appointee U.S. Attorney Geoffrey Berman in charge of the Southern District of New York's case against Michael Cohen. This despite the fact that Berman had already recused himself. If that story's right, what are the implications for Trump and for Whittaker?
Well, first of all, the president is entitled to direct the Department of Justice. Thomas Jefferson told his attorney general to prosecute Aaron Burr, and not only that, he gave witnesses immunity and threatened witnesses. So historically and constitutionally, the president is in charge of every branch of the government under the unified executive theory. Should he be doing it? No, he shouldn't be doing it. President shouldn't be interfering with the administration of justice, particularly when it involves people who are close to them and people who might testify against them. So I think what he did, if it's true, is wrong, but probably not unconstitutional.
What do you make about the acting former FBI Director Andrew McCabe's new book, which he says officials discuss the possibility of invoking the 25th Amendment?
Well, I think if it's true that officials seriously thought about invoking the 25th Amendment, that's a very, very damaging and dangerous phenomenon. The 25th Amendment was designed for Woodrow Wilson having a stroke, Ronald Reagan having been shot, President Kennedy having been assassinated. It was designed for a president who was unable to fulfill his duties for physical or very obvious psychiatric reasons. For example, James Forrestal, when he was Secretary of Defense, was a paranoid schizophrenic who believed the Russians were sending missiles after him, and he jumped out of the high floor of the Walter Reed building, killing himself. That's the kind of psychosis or physical disability the 25th Amendment was intended to address, not disagreements over policies, not even criminal conduct. Even if you believe that the president engaged in criminal conduct with Russia, that's grounds for impeachment, but it's not grounds for removal over the 25th Amendment. So it was a serious, serious breach to even consider, if it was done seriously, invoking the 25th Amendment.
Following Mueller's indictment of Roger Stone, you said that Mueller has found almost no crimes that occurred before he was appointed special counsel. You suggested virtually failed to do the job he was appointed to do. Do you still feel that way about Mueller?
I do. I like Mueller personally. I think he's a person of very high integrity. But if you look at the three categories of cases that he has really managed to go after, there are crimes that were committed called process crimes after he becomes special prosecutor. People who lied. These are serious crimes. People who lied, people who misled, things that occurred after the investigation began. Then there are things that occurred before the investigation began, but they're related to taxi medallions, bank fraud. Those are just efforts to squeeze people to get them to testify against the real target. And then the third category are Russians, people who were indicted who will never be brought to the United States. So at the moment, I don't see that there was much of a justification for bringing on a special counsel, but we have to wait and see. Have to keep an open mind. Let's see what the Mueller report contains. Maybe it'll have smoking guns that we're not aware of. That would surprise me, but I think we all have to keep an open mind.
Alan, you've been around so long. Have you ever seen a more chaotic 2 years of an administration?
Larry, we've been around equally long, both of us, and I think we can both say we live in interesting times. No, I've never seen the first 2 years as chaotic as this. You know, there was chaos, obviously, after 9/11. There were problems. Other administrations have had problems over the years, but I've never seen anything quite to parallel this. But our system of checks and balances is working. The president doesn't get everything he wants. Congress stops him. The courts occasionally stop him. The public stops him. Consider when he tried to separate families at the border. There was a revolution. The public said no. The media said no. The academy said no. The churches said no. Businesses said no. And he had to withdraw that, and he had to change it. So democracy is thriving in America. I don't see democracy in danger. The sky is not falling in as the result of this administration. Our Constitution is being tested, but it's passing the test.
Alan, as always, thanks for your time today. Be well.
You too. You too.